Hello and welcome to the SRC podcast. Joining me, Big M, Double R, Mr. Rob Reese. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. It's been a while.
It
How are
has,
we
mate.
doing, my friend?
All good, mate. All good. We're a year older, effectively now. We were
Oh, yeah.
a year older.
Don't,
Christmas derbies are both gone. The New Year fixture's gone. If
um,
it's all going on, yeah.
I know we got a fair bit to talk about now, and there are still some games twinkling on there or thereabouts, so it's good. Apologies for anyone who's been missing their SRC podcast. Life caught up with us, unfortunately, but we are back at least for this week. So let's kick off with the game that brought me the biggest smile of the week, and it just happened to be, a little bit further north than Brecon. So RGC at home to Ebbw Vale, quite literally last kick of the game, 41-39. That is absolutely epic win for RGC. Of course, they just seem to do it on their own patch. A couple losses, but 80%, 90% of the time they're winning on their home patch. So it's no disservice to anyone not winning up there. But as the man from Ebbw Vale, what are you feeling? How did this game really plan out? We've all seen the highlights.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a disappointment probably for a lot of the squad, and especially I think Jason would have been pretty annoyed at conceding 41 points a week after only conceding three at home to Pontypool. But I think RGC sort of they play their expansive game plan. We talked about it, especially at the start of the season when they were scoring lots of tries. Stoddard bagged 6 in 4 weeks or whatever it was. Obviously, he got the try that basically won the game in the end. They offered a lot of good options. They played at a high pace and they dragged Ebbw Vale into that game, and it doesn't suit Ebbw Vale, especially not on that sort of surface. But equally, I think what'll frustrate Jason Strange and the coaching staff up at Ebbw is the defensive effort, not just conceding, but if you've seen the highlights, you only got to look at the, the second try of RGC scored in the highlights, and there's 5 missed tackles. I think it was. You're not gonna compete against a good side in this league by missing as many tackles as you do on the day. And it's one of those ones, it's 85 minutes on the clock. Ebbw Vale are obviously winning 39-34. And you're sort of going, okay, just blow up, ref, this is it. Stoddard goes over in the corner, and fair play to Billy McBride. It is as far out as you're going to get a kick. The last kick of the game, but what it also meant is he overtook Evan Lloyd in the golden points this season. He's now 1 point ahead of Evan Lloyd. So yeah, I think if he was a neutral watching it, it'd have been a really good sort of game. And RGC will be absolutely thrilled with that one because it actually sort of puts them back in that sort of, let's call it the chase impact, shall we say?
Yeah, 100%. Like, if we talk about the golden boot or whatever sort of moniker it's going to have this year, Evan Lloyd in this game, he got a try, 4 conversions, 2 penalties. That's 19 points. And then there's Billy McBride, who just thought, you're backing it up now. So 2 tries for him, 4 conversions himself, and a penalty. So, between these boys, I mean, it's just stupid the amount of points they score. And they may as well just play the game between themselves. It would have been a good scoreline. But I, I think, especially where Billy is concerned, you can see where there's been professional rugby there. Obviously you grow up in Wales, and I don't care what anyone says. I think the best goal kickers in world rugby come from Wales. We've got so many high percentage kickers. It's just absolutely stupid, you know. And to nail kicks like that, it's just another level. You know what I mean? It's especially when you're talking it weren't just a kick, it was a kick to win the game, it was a kick to move RGC up the table, it was a kick to put him at top of the top point scorer. So there was a lot riding on it, and I'm pretty sure he would have known all of that at the time. So, hell of a lot of credit to him for that. So if we do just nip back slightly to the Christmas derbies, RGC had a bit of a point to prove coming into this game because they beat Bridgend away pre-Christmas, and then they somehow managed to lose at home to Bridgend, which, I think that shocked all of us. I don't. I'm trying to have a little look at our prediction table now, and no one thought that RGC was going to lose at home to Bridgend. So they've gone up a gear. They've taken that hit really personally, and they've gone out and shown it against. I don't want to say the best in the league, but currently top of the league. You're still top, so you still got that to back on. But two big derbies for Ebbw Vale before this game. They both swung each way. You obviously you picking up an incredible win, 34 points to 3 on the 28th. But going down 23-16 at Pooler Park. So do you perhaps think that you was too buoyant, maybe took RGC for granted a little bit?
Quite possibly, but I don't. That's not the sort of culture that Jason instills. It's very much a fitness. We don't take anything for granted. That we do the basics sort of right. It's not a flashy game plan. I think it's one of those ones. RGC has never been an easy place to go, but Ebbw Vale have never made it an easy place to go. I've been up there a few times now, and it's never been. Doesn't matter where the two sides are. It always seems to be a bit of a gritty sort of game. And I think that's what'll hurt is maybe that they weren't ready for the pace out of the doors, and all of a sudden I just opened it up, and you could see from the sort of the first 15, 20 minutes that this was going to be a high scoring affair. And that's what's caught Ebbw Vale out, and they never managed to pull that pace back and run their own game plan for long enough to sort of stamp their authority on over RGC.
Fair enough. So if we just look at the table and Ebbw Vale season so far, 12 games in, 9 wins. You are top of the table, 52 points. You are 1 point clear, so it's really tight in that top 4 section. So would you say, are you happy with how the seasons has gone? Have you met expectations? You exceeded them? Where do you kind of see where you're at? Looking at the manner of your performances and the few losses.
Um, it, it could all hinge on the Newport double, but at the moment they are probably above expectation. Certainly are in terms of where they are on the table. But when you consider they've played Cardiff twice, Pooler twice, Llandovery twice, and taken 4 wins out of those 6 games, they're definitely on sort of the right trajectory. And I think for Ebbw Vale now, it's about getting a home knockout stage, because they haven't had one of those for quite a while now. Obviously, they travelled away last year. The cup semi-finals are always neutral grounds. The year they won the league, that they was away to Pontypridd. The year before that, they was away to Pontypridd. So there's quite a bit of a want, I guess, to try and get a crowd up at Eugene Cross. Like I say, there was around 4,000 there for the Pontypool game, and that's terrific to see, and good crowds around other clubs as well. But I think that's going to be the big target, is nail that home sort of knockout stage and go from there. Obviously, if you finish top of the table, if there's basically nothing stopping you from having the final at your place, right? And that's got to be the ultimate goal, because you don't want to go away to Cardiff or Llandovery, especially just talking about the pace of the game up at RGC. Both artificial pitches, both coming into their own. They'll have strong squads at that time of the season. You want to be making sure that it's on your home turf.
Yeah. And if we look to RGC, well, last season was, in the league at least, was 1-7, lost 16. Right now, they're sitting in 7th, but they've won 6 and lost 7. So, in my eyes, they're disappointed with the 2 home losses they've had. Obviously, they got the reverse against Bridgend, so it kind of balances itself out in that matter. But No, I think they'd be very happy with,
Mm.
where they are and where they're currently heading.
Yeah, I think Josh Leach sort of had a bit of an unknown quantity coming into it. They've signed really well. The back line is one of the best out there, actually, I will say. When everybody's fit, it is one of those that's probably a few positions above where they are on the table if you actually rated everyone's back line. But it is a lot of progression. I mean, they're what? Uh, Seventh in the table. And
Yeah,
when a lot of people were probably predicting them, including I think all of us, for bottom or ninth, somewhere around that. And at the moment, they're 4 points off Bridgend, two places above them. Yes, they are, have played a couple of sort of games above them, but with Pontypool, sorry, with 11 games, Bridgend have played the 13. But you sort of see RGC as being able to climb that table at the moment. Bridgend sort of, despite that, the win over RGC, you sort of going, ooh. They had a bit of a shaky patch, but all of a sudden they're coming back strong. But I think RGC, if you look at the relative strength of the teams around them as well, will be pleased with the progression they've shown.
good. Okay, so we'll move on to the next game, which will be Bridgend and Aberravan, because I'm looking at the table now, and Bridgend are really an outlier as it stands. We'll talk a bit more about how this season is going, but they're currently fifth with 5 wins, and the two teams below them with 6. So bonus points are a massive for Bridgend and Scott Baldwin's side. So onto the actual game itself. Bridgend at the brewery, home to Aberravan, 20 points to 5 down at the break. Now, following this game, I really have no idea how it got flipped on his head. Obviously, John isn't here tonight to give us the Aberravan man's view of this game, but even he was messaging us doing this. What's going on? How are we doing this? What are we doing to ourselves? He was so he was manic. He couldn't believe that the Aberravan threw away such a big lead to eventually go down 30 points to 27. But for me, we've seen Bridgend as fast starters. We've seen them come out, we've seen them get a few scores and then sort of drift away. But in the past 2 rounds, obviously the loss to RGC at home before Christmas, you know, they've done RGC away, and that's no easy feat. And now they've had to fight back and put on probably the closest thing to an 80-minute performance they've had to get back in front over them. Because again, this was another last kick of the game. I think it was the 82nd minute, apparently, that they drew level. And then they got another penalty a couple of minutes later. Don't ask me who's doing, the time counting. I have no idea. But it, it seems promising for Bridgend, being able to one get such a big victory, 38-19 against RGC and RGC, and then to really fight back and win at home, from such a big deficit. I know the crowd gets behind you and everything, but that sometimes that's not enough. So I'd expect Scott Baldwin is really happy with the fact they came back to it. Very annoyed that they were down so badly at half time. But yeah, so what are we thinking on this one?
Yes, I think Bridgend had a bit of a weird side. They did it a couple of years ago they had a very, very mixed to poor start of the season. And then the new year was like they were beating everybody. And whether we're going to see that happen is going to be another thing. But yeah, Aberravan at the moment don't look like a side who are enjoying controlling things. They've had a bit of a tough spell really. The last 3 games, 2 losses and a win. But the first win, over Swansea in sort of the first festive derby, 26-0, I think it was.
Yeah,
Um, it it probably shows where they are. It's a poor Swansea side, but you've kept them out, but probably haven't scored as many points as you want. Then lose to Swansea for their first victory of the season the week after, and then throw away a really big lead at half time. And you just got to keep that sort of level of physicality and the pace up. You can't be dropping off and trying to come out and play it steady. It's the old adage of you got to come out and play to win, not play not to lose. you've sort of got a bit of self-confidence, and maybe that's what's lacking in a young squad. And the side has struggled at times this year, especially losing to Swansea the week before. That probably didn't do confidence any good. So no doubt Jason Hyatt and the team will be disappointed in that one. But lots of positives, I think, for both sides. But Bridgend may be pushing back at the table. Don't think they'll go any higher than fifth. If they can stay there, I think that's a massive boost for them. I think it'll be a case of what Pontypool do now in the next two games, and then chasing it down from there. But yeah, I think for Bridgend, getting back on track probably suggests where they are this season. They can beat the top side on their day. I don't really think they have done that yet, but they're picking up a lot of tricky wins. And if they can start stringing a few more together, then yeah, I think Bridgend might have an half decent start to 2025.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at Bridgend's record so far. Only the 5 wins. So they've done the double over Swansea, the double over Aberafan, and they've beaten RGC. So, not exactly title contender worthy, but obviously the way this
No,
league is set up, anyone can actually win it. Now,
it's it's a weird one though, right? Because I think three of the they lost to Newport. I think it was in round one. Bridgend then went on to win three in a row before playing a couple of tough games. I think it was something like Ebervale,
yeah,
Cardiff. They played the few of the big top teams. Had a couple of stuff-ins, really knocked them down the table. But it's good to see them recover, and it's good to see that, again, a side that's got a lot of young players and a lot of new players, especially in that back line and around the sort of the half-back pairing, even though Luke Price has been back of late, they are bouncing back, and they are digging in deep, and that's a sign of a really well-drilled side.
yeah. And so it's all plaudits for Bridgend, really. They are a side that's moving forward. I think everyone kind of wants them to add a bit of more physicality. Like I said, they are a young side. We comment they are quite. I don't want to say they're small because there are no real small players when it comes to top end rugby, but they don't have the behemoths that perhaps Ebbw Vale, Llandovery, Newport, Cardiff can call upon. So if we go back to Aberava now, and we talked about these festive derbies over against Swansea, I should say. And one of the things they tried to focus on is the fact that we only conceded 10 points over the 2 games, which, if you're looking at that just plain on paper, you're not taking anything else into account, is absolutely brilliant. But when you're considering you've conceded 10 points over 2 games and you've somehow lost one of them, that does take a bit of a hit. It was only 7-0 up in the first game, 0-0 at half time in the second. So I worry that Aberafan maybe stuttering. They thought they were getting, a bit of this stuff, a bit of their bite back in this game, and then it's kind of filtered away. Their only point in the second half was a penalty try. So I am worried about where Aberafan are going, especially considering we're coming into 20 season and they are a very young squad. Someone like Scott Del Nevo is unbelievably, valuable to this side, and he is off with the under 20, so that could hurt them. So over to the league table performance so far. Already touched on it. Bridgend in fifth with 5 wins. They won't be happy with the amount of wins they've got, but the fact that they're in fifth, you know, I think they would have taken that every day of the week.
Yeah.
And if we swap over to Aberafan now, they what's that? Fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. But they're only 8 points off Bridgend. So, fifth through to ninth is quite clustered. There's 10 points between them. So I probably think that the teams are more focused on performance rather than where they are, because 2 games, everything can completely switch.
I
So
th- I think the big factor is going to be getting in that top six and avoiding that early playoff in the first round of the knockouts. That's probably going to be the big factor for a lot of these sides. Swansea at this stage may be just outside of those thoughts, but certainly RGC, Aberafan and Quins are going to be in that mindset of let's get into that top six at the moment. I do think Pontypool will take the fifth spot, but I think it's one of those ones, the fact that they haven't really sealed it off at the moment, that's going to be the big aim. And like you said, once it goes to knockout rugby, you may as well wipe the slate clean and start writing him up again. So it's anybody's game.
Okay. So we move on to Cardiff and Swansea, and we'll focus on Swansea first.
Mm.
Obviously, getting nilled in that first derby isn't great, but they got their first win of the season, on the 28th after Christmas, 10-8 at home to Aberafan. You know, brilliant for the league, brilliant for them. Everyone's got a win on the board. But then going into this match against Cardiff, at Cap, I thought they carried a hell of a lot of confidence with them. They weren't just there to make up numbers, which, to be fair, the way Cardiff can go with their back line, it could have easily been, an 8-9 try stuff in. But, 17-12 down at half time, 32-22 it finished. And, they probably counted themselves unlucky they didn't at least get a bonus point, if not two, in this game. They got the 3 tries in those 22 points. So, Swansea, I'm happy to say, I think are on the up. I think they've taken a lot of confidence from the Aberafan. I don't know where the next win is going to come from, but I believe that the confidence they've gained from that win, what they've shown at Cap, I think in performances at least are going to go up a gear or two.
Yeah, I think it's what was actually quite uncharacteristic of Swansea is probably for the first time this season they actually started quickly rather than sort of trying to do a bit of a blister, in that sort of middle third. 12-0 up, and at that stage you go in, hang on a minute, they got a win on the board last week. Are they starting to rumble? But I think you could see the underlying quality and the experience come through in that sort of Cardiff squad. They know where they are. 9 wins this season. They're only a point off top of the table on the home patch. Again, it's Swansea aren't used to playing on artificial surface. And it catches up with teams. I think it was Bridgend that was down there, and they was looking really good till that final sort of quarter. But Swansea kept in the game and chipping away at points. Yes, once they'd done their first couple of tries, it was nipping a penalty here or there, but it keeps you in the games. And it sounds ridiculous, not that Swansea are looking at it from this perspective, but it stopped Cardiff getting that 6th point. Now, obviously, Swansea were aiming to get the point, not to stop Cardiff. But it's good to see that Swansea are feeling confident that they don't have to chase tries, that they feel that if they just keep in the game and put the points on the board, that they're going to be in with a chance. And I think that's a sign that they're confident in themselves. And with Josh Phillips kicking, I mean, he's still the only goal kicker over 80% this season. And you're going to be guaranteed a good amount of points. It's a good surface to kick from. And yeah, I am a bit disappointed for Swansea. I think they did deserve to get a point out of that one, but it was an actually really good game. And I think what it does at the top of the table as well is keeps it all really tight knit, similar to 5th to 9th.
Yeah, so looking by Cardiff's games so far this season at home, 6 points against Ebbw Vale, 6 points against Carmarthen Quinn, 6 points against Aberafan, 6 points against Bridgend, 6 points against Pontypool. Newport were the only team in the first derby to get a win at Cap, and then Swansea really are the next team to deny them the 6 points. So, if we talk a bit about the festive derbies of Cardiff, because they were decimated a bit, the backline for that first game against Newport. There was an under-20s development game against Scotland. One was down here in Ystrad Mynach. Or was it Merthyr? It was one of the two. I think it was Merthyr. Yeah. So, and the other one then the following week up in Edinburgh. So, they got decimated in that first week. But they fought back in the second one, and they got the win on the 28th. What was it, 36 points to 30. So they showed exactly what type of side Cardiff are. They're all backs, and yeah. I think we've known this all season, and we'll come on to this with the final game of the round. We got Ebbw Vale, who are a 90% forwards team, and we've got then Cardiff, who are a 90% backs team. So
yeah, I think Cardiff's biggest worry over this sort of Christmas period, and it sort of started against Ebbw Vale in that fixture, is they've lost quite a few players to senior call-ups. And I think that is where they rely heavily. I think at some stage they've had 5 senior forwards in that pack throughout the season. Obviously, they had the two Welsh front rowers against Ebervale, and you look at that and go, they've got the players in the circle, but then when they start losing players like Harry Wiles, like Stefan Manuel, Derby Cross had to pull out, and he's not featured since. Tom Bowen stepped up. There's there's a side decimated, and then if you're not getting your Reece Barretts, I know he has appeared in the last 3 weeks. If you're not getting those sort of players, you're not getting your Evan Daniel, your Will Davis King dropping in. It's Luke De La Rua as being a bit more of a prominent figure, but
Yeah.
Mackenzie Martin's had a couple of appearances, but you can't rely on these senior players because they ultimately want to play senior rugby, and they're going to take whatever's on hand. But if there's a senior game on hand, they're going to be taking that game. And ultimately, I think that's what's hurt Cardiff the past few weeks. More performances. Obviously, they said they're still only 1 point off the top of the table. Yes, they lost that place. They were top of the table. So there's been a bit of a turnaround. But I think for them, it's get through this bit of I say a rough patch by their standards in terms of who's available to the squad. Get through the 20s, obviously with the cup coming up now. And then once you sort of got through there, hopefully you have your few injuries back, the senior squad will be okay. So you have your Derby Crosses, your Tom Bowens, people like that come back into the squad. And then all of a sudden, the knockout stages look a bit more ominous for anybody who's pulling out the name Cardiff out the hat. So I don't think there's anything to worry about by Cardiff sort of dropping performances. I think it's quite contextual, really.
Yeah. I mean, Cardiff, as in the Rags, I think are quite lucky in the way they've landed with the SRC and the fact that they are the only feeder team for their region. You know, I've looked through the other teams and know everyone has had a parachute player. Now, what if anyone doesn't know what we mean by this is not an under 23 player, not someone who's still on an academy contract as such, someone who is a first team player. So your Reece Barrett, your Joe Cowells, Evan Daniel, Will Davis King, Mackenzie Martin, etc. The boys that are on full time professional contracts. So every side I think has had, probably barring RGC, have had at least one or two. But Cardiff do get a good chunk, and it is always forwards. And looking at the regional worries at the minute, I know most of the injuries are coming in the backs. They've recently signed some injury cover, but Cardiff are heavily reliant on their top form backs, and I know they've got. What are we talking about here? We're talking this, obviously the seven backs in your starting 15. They've probably got 10 or 11 they can rotate through without much drop, but they're losing a lot of them boys rapidly, which, like you said, is an issue, and we will see how that develops now through these coming weeks with the under 20s. People get injured in the under 20s. For the Welsh Academy side, I know Ben Williams from Carmarthen Quins. He picked up an injury a couple of days ago, so he's not going to be featuring for a few weeks. Things like that can happen. These boys who are coming onto this stage, ready to show to the world or show to the men and the women who really make decisions, what they can do, and they take a knock. So it is unfortunate on that front. But I'm not anti Cardiff, but I'm not pro Cardiff. So I've got a half smile, thinking that they could start faltering. But yeah, it's the way our league is structured now. Anyone can win. Swansea pick up form. They only need to get 3-4 wins. They hit a run into the playoffs, and they could even do it. So start with Swansea. Obviously, they can't be happy at all being bottom of the league, one win, 15 points off ninth. We've just spoken about now that they're hopefully on a bit of an upward curve, but one more do you think they should be doing to try and take that next step?
It's a difficult one because their obvious flaw is lack of physicality up front and a lack of cohesion around the set piece. I think they seem to get it in smaller spells and then it disappears. Unfortunately, it's one of those things you can't really coach it if you haven't got the player base. So I don't think it's process driven, unfortunately. But they're also underachieving, and maybe this is the sort of the turnaround. And they have been in a lot of games up until the last quarter where they sort of drop away against Pontypool, Llandovery, teams like that. So they're putting in some decent performances. But yeah, they got to focus on closing the gap at this stage. That's what I think is their target. And then vice versa, Cardiff, I think with Steve Law going after an extended spell at the club, and handing the reins over to Dan Fish, it's never an easy role to sort of take that one. Because of the success that Cardiff have seen in recent years. And I'll be honest, if it wasn't for COVID, they probably would have had 2 or 3 more pieces of silverware in the cabinet as well. But to sit 1 point off top with, again, a sort of a side that stretches when the pro side basically need it to, I think that's a fairly successful season so far for them.
Yeah, I think Cardiff will be, very happy, especially considering, you go back to last term, they finished fourth, 26, 27 points off second and first. So the fact that there is literally just one bonus point between them and top place because they've got the best, they've scored the most amount of tries this season. They've got the best point difference. It is literally that one match point that they're missing out on. So, by all accounts, I think Cardiff are probably the happiest team in this league, knowing what they've got, what they're capable of, and having access to those parachute players that we've spoken about. So this brings us on to our final game, which was due to be a humdinger. It was a humdinger. Llandovery at home to Newport. Now, we go back way back to, I don't even know where I'm going now. I'm actually lost where I'm going to this first meeting, and it was 30 points to 28. A Llandovery win in Newport back on the 10th of October in round 5, and this was the first time that we saw Llandovery really play in this league. And for me, at least, coming from the Llandovery Carmarthen Quins point of view, they've kind of been sailing ever since. They've kind of been sort of bouncing between second and third gear, but they've come into this game, and I would never have backed a 6 point win against Newport. Any circumstances, before a team sheet is named, obviously, I would never back a 6 point win against Newport. So the fact that they've gone 38-21 winners, and now I said this in our little chat before that, I'm dubbing this one the Battle of the Baby Centres, because Harry Ackerman, at 12 for Newport, grabbed a beautiful hat trick, essentially allowed them to score all 21 of their points. And then on the other side of it, you had Max Page making his first start for Llandovery this season, get his own hat trick. So it is really great to see the sort of talent that can flourish given the opportunities. In this league, condensing it down to 10 teams has really increased that standard, which is something I was actually quite worried about when the whole elite development competition side of things was announced. I thought, is 10 really going to improve it that much? I thought, maybe 12 would have been a safer bet. But in all fairness, it was a cracker just to watch the highlights, even though they got one of the floodlights in the way, which is quite indicative of where Welsh rugby kind of is. You set up your cameras and you got to avoid the floodlights. So it was an interesting one to watch. But yeah, Llandovery, they pull it out for the big games when they need to. And I don't know how you feel about this, but for me, despite being third and fourth in the table, Llandovery and Newport are 1 and 2 in everyone's eyes. They, like I said, Ebbw Vale have got a pack, Cardiff have got a back line. Llandovery and Newport can match both of them, which is, why it makes them those top 2 teams despite where they are on the table.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
definitely the most well-rounded 15s, certainly on paper. And I think this is probably this is probably the moment where I think everyone has gone, yeah, this is the land of actually of old. You know, what is it? They've strung a load of wins on the bounce now. They look like a title, double winning team from last year. To do a double over Newport takes some doing. And to do it in the fashion they have is a shame that this wasn't televised. Obviously, the televised game was due to be Pontypool Quins. That was cancelled due to the frozen pitch. But it's one of those ones. The development of this, the development aspect of this league, if I can get my words out, was always the main talking point on how many teams, how's it going to work, the parachute players, all the discussion and sort of the Twitterati all set off. But it's great to see two young centres, two positions that Welsh Rugby hasn't got a hidden bunch of gems in at the moment. We've not got a wealth of riches in midfield. And it's great to see that, yes, they're going to be a little while off the Welsh jersey yet, but it's good to see two great players in those positions, both coming through, taking the limelight. And for the league, this is what you want. Yes, it wasn't the closest game, but an all-spirited, very fiery, very fast game played at a very high level. And I think Llandovery will be very quietly pleased with where they are this season at the moment. 2 points off top now in third. So even though they're down the table slightly, that could very much all change within, I'll say the next week, within the next round. Um, but I still don't know what to think of Newport. They seem to blow hot and cold in performances. It wasn't a bad performance, but they just didn't have enough up front. They're missing a few key players this season, I think, is where that inconsistency is coming from. Matt O'Brien is inconsistently being selected, and that's not helping them. And we talked about this, I think, just before Christmas on their fly half selection. No Renard Landman for a little while, or Joe Peards, those sort of boiler house players you can rely on. And Landman was probably player of the season last year, top 3 or 5 sort of thing. And you can see that Llandovery now are starting to boil again. And because they've come out of nowhere, no one's really talking about them. But I think you are right. I still think Llandovery and Newport are probably top two favourites for now. The Gwent derby against Ebervale, because there's the two fixtures yet to come, may start to swing how that is seen. But at this time, I think it's extremely hard to decide. And I do think it'll come down to, when we get out to 4 teams, who's the home team. Because at the moment, Cardiff have done, Ebervale down there comfortably, but then lost to Newport. Llandovery lost to Ebervale twice, but then have done a double over Newport. So it's all these sides are sort of switching around who they're beating. Um, it could be very interesting. And now that's assuming that these four are the last four and no one throws a spanner in the works. But I think it could be a very tasty competition if those are the last four standing, similar to the last season. Because I think this season, Cardiff and Ebervale last year were third and fourth. But I think that you knew that there was a gap between them and Newport and Llandovery. You could see it. This season, I don't think that gap is as big, especially if we turn it round and say you're at the Arms Park, you're at Eugene Cross Park, and that's the big factor for me. And I think the home advantage will come in more this year than it ever will.
Well, yeah, it's now multiple knockout rounds to win. Is
Yeah,
we obviously, like we've discussed earlier, you got that sort of mini start to the playoffs where what was it, seventh, eighth, ninth, and 10th meet, but then just it's a free for all. So you're not just banking on winning. Oh, we'll win this one game and then we're basically within the final. It's not that simple. It's literally you're starting from a quarter final point if you're not in that bottom four. So it is incredibly interesting, and I'm just even looking at Newport's record now through the season now, and like you said, their losses, two of them have come against Llandovery, one against Cardiff. So two of the two of the other top four teams, and then away to Pontypool, which is essentially a derby. So they're not losing little games. Them say they still they're winning the games they're meant to be winning. You might argue they should have won that Pontypool match, but no, it's gone now. We can't change that. So Llandovery over the Christmas period, they done the double over Carmarthen Quins. I was kind of disappointed in the first game where I think it was 35 points to 5, at Churchbank, which you don't like seeing games with such large margins, especially in the derbies. But then 27-22 in the return fixture. So Carmarthen Quins, much improved, especially at home. So that's brilliant for them. So we are on to Carmarthen Quins and Pontypool. They didn't play, but I think something that has been made note of in I think it was either S4C or BBC, whoever was coming in, is that Scott Williams is bouncing around that Pontypool squad and training with the Dragons. So that's an interesting approach. Picking up a player that honestly I thought had retired. We couldn't get in the regional 23 the last season. I can't remember the season before, so I don't want to comment on that. But yeah, it's a weird place for Pontypool to be looking for ringers like that. And I know obviously you're not the biggest of Pontypool fans, but you've got a better insight than me. So what's going on down there? How are they all feeling with? Well, what is it? 6th place, is it? 6 wins, more wins than losses. That has to be said. So you can't knock that. So what is the mood like? How do you think they're feeling?
I think it's one of those sort of weird situations down at Pontypool. This, excuse the weird random noises. The dog on the bed behind me is making that. I'm not hungry, honestly. Um, but it's a weird one with Pontypool. The squad they've got, and this season they've actually had a larger allocation of Dragons players than Ebervale and Newport combined. Um, so I think they need to be pushing that top four. I seriously think they do. But then equally, we look at the sort of the rotation and who they're bringing in. Scott Williams, I know, was discussed with other Gwent clubs where he was going to be moved around. I think a lot of it was where he could commit time to and not just rocking up on one Thursday and saying, oh yeah, I'm going to be playing on the Saturday. Obviously, he's played the once against Ebervale down at their place. He didn't look the fittest, I'll be honest, for someone of his background and calibre. He certainly didn't stand out in midfield at all. Didn't play the return fixture, and obviously didn't end up playing despite being named against Quins because that one was called off. But it's probably a strange one because I think they move up to 5th and they close the gap to Newport. And I think that Pontypool are probably that weird side now where they're the Norwich City of the Super Rugby Cymru. They're too good for the bottom 6, but for the bottom 5, but they're not good enough for the top 4. And that was what sort of happened last year. They had a 2-point deduction last year as well and sort of fell right in the middle of both of those. So I think you'd be happy with the season so far as a Pontypool supporter. It just comes down now to finishing it strong and ultimately trying to push into that top 4 ready for the knockouts.
Yeah, I'm glad you elaborated on the Norwich City because I know where Norwich is, but I have no idea what you were talking about there for a minute. It's the wrong. I'm assuming was it basketball or is it cricket, something like that?
Round ball. It is a round ball. We'll
It's
leave that one off the pod. Round ball.
a round ball. Okay, that leaves us with Carmarthen Quins. Ooh, they're down in 9th. They've picked up 4 wins, which considering what 12 games gone, so 6 games left in the league. You compare that to them last season, where they was 1-6, lost 18. So they were losing 1. They were winning 1 and losing 2. So they're kind of along the same tracks. I mean, I thought a lot more of this Quinn side at the start of the season. They haven't quite been able to get the back line out that they really could because quite frankly, for me, if they can put out their first choice back line, I think they do rival Cardiff, especially with pace and raw talent. But they haven't quite managed to do that. So I'm thinking that the guys in Carmarthen Park, they're going to be quite disappointed where they are. They would have hoped for at least two more wins. I think they would have wanted to be 50-50. So I don't know what your take is on where the Quins are standing, but it is the way this league has gone. We got the top three, fourth on its own, and then fifth through nine, that seemingly interchangeable. But Quins have got outside of Swansea, they've got the worst points difference, the lowest amount of tries scored. That is joint with Pontypool, which is quite surprising for me to say when I'm looking at this table. So yeah, I think Quins will be a little bit disappointed with how they've lined up, but I think there's still some optimism in there. They know that their best backline will come. They've played Cardiff twice, they've played Llandovery twice, they've played Ebbw Vale and Newport once. So if you're talking that top four, of those 8 games, they've only got two left to play. So a sort of not easier, but a sort of smoother final 6 league games for them. So do we think Quins can pop up the table? Do you think they could get into that vital 6th spot to avoid the weirdness of the first playoff round?
Yeah, I think Quinn's out of all those squads down there look like the sort of side that could really get into even the top teams. They've got that sort of really nice blend when everyone's around of experience up front, a really good set piece with some really big players in it, especially if the likes of Tuapolotu drop down. They look best when led by Charlie Titcombe at fly half. And as you say, they've got that sort of that pace, that really cutting edge weaponry out wides to sort of split anybody open. So if anybody's going to climb this table, it would be Quins. I just feel that Quins' biggest problem is sort of like what Cardiff have, but obviously they don't have the same core strength squad, and that's you can't rely on these players dropping down. I mean, if the Scarlets had a couple of injuries and then Titcombe disappears for the rest of the season, you don't get to a Pilato players in those key positions that have been going well for them. All of a sudden, you're sort of looking at it and going, I can't see Quins doing much. And it's the Christmas Derby said a lot about where I thought they were. I thought they were going to be blown away in the first game, which they sort of were, and a close second game, but still lose it. And I think that sort of says where they are. They do adjust with the time, and they're the sort of side that give everybody a good game, but they're just coming up short.
Yeah. So I'm going to give a plug to a different podcast right now. On the Scarlets podcast that we promote, Saucepan and Side Zebs, me and my other co-host, who were lucky enough to sit down with Scott Sneddon and Tom Phillips. Tom Phillips, captain of Quins, to discuss the academy. And I noticed something just before we went to talk with these guys. And Tom Phillips, he's captained Quins for a good while now. His last game was the win away to Bridgend, and they haven't won a game since. So they were 6. Well, sorry, I don't want to say that. They were 4-4 with Tom Phillips in the match day 23, and without him, they're 0-4. So a little bit disappointing, and there's no return in sight as it stands, unfortunately. But obviously, he is around. He is a coach, so I think that Tom Phillips is quietly, and I say quietly because we talk about so many other players, the likes of Ben Williams, Karen Tuapolotu, Charlie Titcombe. He is quietly, a major key to how this Quinn side work. Now, going forward, I would love to be able to say, as a Quins fan, that Charlie Titcombe, Carwyn Tuapolotu, Ben Williams, Sam O'Connor, these parachute boys. Well, Ben Williams isn't really given his age. These boys will be with Quins for the rest of the season, but I know that they won't. Ben Williams has picked up an injury this week, as I've already alluded to. One injury in the back rows at the Scarlets, and that means Karen Tuaplotu is off as a travelling reserve, or even in the match day 23. And the news that has come out today about Johan Lloyd leaving the Scarlets, that means that essentially Charlie Titcombe is their second 10. And if that is 100% fact, and Dwayne Peel and his fellow coaches have a similar mindset to me, if I know one player's buggering off and I've got another player behind him that I need to get in game time, I'm going to be pushing all my eggs into him. I'm going to be bringing him in. I'll be giving him minutes off the bench more than I have done all season. So I am worried for Quins that their Scarlets, shall we say, are going to filter out slowly over the coming months. And, which something that's unusual down west is they've had a good season with injuries, which has allowed, obviously, the likes of, Carwyn Tuaplotu, Ben Williams and co to actually play down there. Both those boys picked up 15 appearances in between the URC and Europe last season. So things are absolutely maddening. Okay, so last thing on Pure SRC is we get to talk about the top scorers so far this season. So I don't know who's done that. Someone always messes things up for me, and I don't know why, but someone has put Ryan Wilkins has got 34 tries. I know Ryan Wilkins doesn't have 34 tries. It's just absolutely wrong. So I'm going to try and ignore that, and it's got to be Joe Franchi is currently leading the try scorers list with 10. He's you a boy. Obviously, that does tell you exactly what type of game you're playing. So how does that make you feel now when the top try scorer is within your ranks?
I think the most impressive part of this stat isn't the fact that Joe's got 10. It's about Ian Morris, I think that's 6. So that's 16 tries, not including penalty tries, which I think they've had about 3 or 4 of this season. They've had a handful of them. Have all come from the hooker, and that's an extreme rarity to see that many, and such a high proportion of the tries coming from one position and obviously the 2 players. But I think
I'm just looking at my ear. It's unreal. It is absolutely unreal. I'm thinking there's 21 tries between the hookers and penalties. Wow. I mean, literally, what was it? 17 was the top scorer last season in a 24-game league. And we're talking realistically, if you don't sub your hooker off, they could have already more than that within 11, 12, 13 games. That's unbelievable. So, I've gone off my page. What am I doing? I'm not very organized tonight. I apologize profusely. So we've followed down the rest of these top scorers. We won't go too far. Derry Cross with 9, and he's been missing for a couple of games too. So, probably a little bit peeved. Another one, Lewis Morgan on 8. Wow, I don't even think I've seen his name in.
He hasn't scored for weeks. He was top try scorer for probably the first 2 months, but he hasn't really done a lot since, I'll be honest.
He hasn't played since the 19th of October. Like, wow. That's a stat and a half, in 6 games. He scored 8 tries, and then I'm assuming he's injured. He is a talent, Lewis Morgan. Fair play to the guy. Like, he's a solid young hooker. So then we go Jens Macaulay Rowley with 8, Sam Stoddard of RGC with 8 as well. We'll touch on these players with 7. We got Tom Bowen of Cardiff, Corey Lewis Jenkins of Aberafan. Great season he's having. Ian Morris on 7. Your other hooker, just insane. And then Alan Rees, another hooker from Cardiff. So lots of hookers, lots of big try scorers. It looks as though some teams have certain finishers, who are just better than others. So we won't go as in depth with the point scorers, but we have touched on it. So we'll go through the top 5. So we got Aberafans, Ed Dunford with 73 in 5th. Swansea's Josh Phillips with 86 in fourth. Kieran Meek, who didn't play this week, only scored 3 the week before on 106. And then we're into the top two that had essentially a title showdown for whatever competition this is going to be. Evan Lloyd on 131 and Billy McBride on 132. That takes them going over 12 games. That's more than 10 points a game. This is astonishing. If you're scoring 10 points a game as a fly half, you're thinking, wow, I'm racking up some points here. But these boys are going up in level again.
No, it's been good to sort of see the levels this year and the accuracy as well. I think Billy McBride, Kieran Meek, Evan Lloyd, and Josh Phillips are all at least 78% accurate to 84% accurate. And that is remarkable when you think of the amount of points that they're kicking. Although if they go on golden boot, it'll be interesting to see how they run it this year, because some years they've run it with tries included and put a top point scorer on it. Other years then they've run it as golden boot. And I think last year they ended up doing golden boot where they ran it when didn't include tries for so many weeks. And so yeah, it's interesting. This year the WIU stats are including the try points as well.
Oh, so that is very, very tasty. So that brings us to the end of everything we really had to discuss regarding the SRC. No fixtures this coming week. I want to say the 18th. That is the date that's in my head. I'm gonna use my cheat sheet. Thankfully that you've given to me, Rob. So cheers for
18th.
that.
Well,
Yeah,
we've
the
got a
18th.
list of a couple of the replays here. So you've
Yeah,
got the Landovery Pontypool game now on Saturday 18th. Obviously, the Bridgend versus Newport game is the 25th, the week after. Aberavon versus Newport is going to be played on the Friday, the 7th of February. That's a 7:30 kickoff. Ebervale's cancelled game against Newport is a Friday night. That's the 21st of February at 7:30. And then you've got Landovery versus Cardiff at Church Bank is Saturday, 8th of March, 2:30 kickoff. Still
yeah.
a few reds to be decided with the clubs, but good to see that we're at least in the background going through some fixtures being rescheduled.
Yeah. So if you've made it to this point, thank you all for listening. You clearly enjoy or hate us, and just you're getting your farewell somewhere. So like, share, subscribe. Do what you want, comment. We love it. So usually I do it at the midway stage. We've kind of done it at the end by here. So last thing to touch on, there is some rugby this weekend, and that would be Wales under-20s against the Welsh academies. And I was under the belief, I should say, that this was going to be an under-23 squad. I don't think it's quite turned out that way. But, for me, this is basically, similar to an NBA All-Star game. It's the SRC All-Star game, just categorized slightly different with ages. So there's loads of players in here that have been, banging games out in Super Rugby Cymru. Dangamine, Evan Minto, Harry Weil, Steph Emanuel, Elijah Evans, Scott Delnevo, Harry's well done. That's just for Wales under 20s, in the starting 15. And then, the academies, Evan Rees, Stella Rua, Owen Conker. Well, we haven't seen him this year, though. That's one thing we need to
He
say.
struggled with a bit of leg infection and stuff like that, and he's been down, so he's not played a huge amount of game time. So he's really looking forward to this.
Yeah, I can
to his family recently.
I can really imagine. So Rodri Lewis, the Carmarthen Quinn scrum half, will be captain. Josh Phillips starts at 10. So that's a tasty looking halfback combination. I do like that. We got Fraser Jones and Gabe McDonald in the centres, Jack Davis at 15. So if we have a little look on the bench and what we got for the Welsh academies is, there's Sam Scar, Freddie Chapman, Joe Cowell, Ethan Phillips, Kobe Rees, Lucas Sotaro, Sam Potter. Sam Potter is one who's been playing most of his rugby for Ammanford, not in the SRC, but again, he's a brilliant talent. Cody Stone and Charlie. I don't know if it's Probert or Probert, but either way, the RGC man's name is in there. And on the under-20 side, they've got, likes of Evan Wood, Owen James, Dylan Alford, Sean Davis, Harry Ford, Oshan Darwin-Lewis, and Yori Badham. A few exiles to be expected in the under-20s. A couple of them I'm a little bit annoyed at. Dean Gwynn and Kyle James, both West Walians, both in Gloucester. Come on, boys, what are you doing? But yeah, so that rugby is at Cap this Friday night, the 10th at 7:30. Did it say how much entry was?
Yeah,
Yeah,
adults of the 5 and under 16s, bargain free.
Yeah, you've got to love that. And then there's going to be another fixture the following week up at Church Bank. I'm assuming the prices will remain the same. So that is everything, my friend. Do you have any last things we want to add before we tip off?
No, I think, do you know what? It's always the same. The four games, the shorter weeks we've had, the more we seem to talk about the games. We just love SRC rugby too much.
Well, no, that's impossible. You can't love SRC rugby too much. You can either love SRC rugby and want to talk about it forever, or you can have something wrong in their head and be negative about it. But we don't like talking about those sort of people. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Rob, for joining me. And like we said, there's only the one game in a fortnight's time and no game this week. So we'll probably come back in a fortnight's time, ease into the new year. We don't want to put too much stress on ourselves. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.